Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome to the GBC SPT 5V program on Caitanya-caritāmṛta Katha. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce today. We have the honor of having the guest, Radha Devi Dasi. Welcome, Radha Prabhu. Hare Krishna. And
Thank you.
She will be enlightening us on the topic of understanding Vaishnava relationships through the Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes and Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. And it is also an interesting coincidence that today happens to be the International Women's Day. And we have personally the International Vaishnavi Minister on our show today. How fortunate is that? Radha Devi Prabhu is a disciple of His Holiness Mukunda Goswami, and she has a lifelong interest in issues concerning devotees, women, and children as well. She is personally also a great source of inspiration for me. Every time I listen to her, I feel restored to sanity. And she currently serves as the ISKCON's Vaishnavi Minister's Minister, which gives her the opportunity to work with the GBC on topics related to Vaishnavis. And she also has worked with ISKCON Communications and also with Child Protection Office. And she has plenty of experience along with her husband, Yudhishthir Prabhu, in congregational preaching. I have personally visited the community where people remember their nurturing and nourishment they've gotten from them. And also, Radha Mataji is a graduate of Harvard Law School, and she practices law in United States with an emphasis on helping victims of domestic abuse. She's also a trained peer counselor for domestic abuse issues. And previously, she also has been a professor, and she's taught at Chapman University School of Law and University of San Diego School of Law. So she's an extremely qualified, very deep, and very compassionate mother and friend to everybody she meets. So with no further delay, let us listen from Radha Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Let me offer my obeisances to all the devotees. Vanchakalpatarubhyaścha kripasindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo. Well, thank you. I hope to live up to that that introduction. I'll pray that I can become what you've described.
What actually inspired you the most about this topic today? Because why I ask this question is, the topic is such that about Vaishnava relationships, and
Yes.
the Vaishnava association today and the time of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu is quite different. And back then, 500 years ago, there was no institution or the organizational structure that we have today. So what is your inspiration to choose this topic to share with us today about how did Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu bring the devotees together? What was his style of organizing?
Yeah. When I look at the Caitanya-caritāmṛta, it's all about personal relationships between devotees. That there's kind of a theme that repeats, that, there's kirtan, there's prasadam, we travel together, there's kirtan, there's prasadam, we travel somewhere else. When I was a younger person, I made the choice to read Caitanya-caritāmṛta to my children. We had read through the Lilamrita, and they actually enjoyed that, they were interested. But Caitanya-caritāmṛta, at one point, my son looks at me and goes, yeah, I know. They had a kirtan and then they had prasadam, and there was some truth to that, this is what our movement was built on. So then I have to think about, well, why did Caitanya Mahaprabhu, why is this the strategy, right? What is powerful about this? And I realize that it is because bhakti is based on relationships. That's the definition of bhakti, is love, which, implies a relationship, implies an exchange. So our relationships with the devotees dictate how close we can become to the Supreme, to Lord Krishna. Our relationships with devotees are probably the most important spiritual resource that we have.
Wow, that was so true. Also, I was wondering, for instance, in Mahaprabhu's pastimes, things are so much different from, say, Krishna's pastimes. For instance, with Krishna's pastimes, there's a very clear distinction between these are the demons and these are the devotees. And Krishna has a plan. He smashes these demons and he finishes them off. That's the end.
Right.
But, the relational dynamics in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, with all the kirtan and pastimes, in the center of all that is relationships. And so what is the style of demon devotee dynamics, or what is the dynamic of relationships? How was this in times of Mahaprabhu, and why is it different? What's your...
Yeah. Well, one big difference is that Krishna Lila deals with institutional structures, not always, but that's definitely part of it. They're dealing with a monarchy, they're dealing with a kingdom, and there are very clear lines between who's on our side and who isn't. Now Krishna also brings people over to his side, right? That's the Lord's mercy. He's always saving the spirit souls, but it's in the sense of defeating them, right? He kills Putana, right? She's liberated, but he has to kill her. Same with, Akasura, Kamsa, and even Kalia, who is, who in his same body transforms into a devotee. Even he is saved by Krishna kicking him to the point, where he has no choice but to surrender, right? So it's, a battle line. It's like Battle of Kurukshetra. A battle line is being drawn. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his mood is not to defeat the devotees so that they will surrender, but to bring them in, to engulf them, right? On the basis of personal relationships, on the basis of an exchange of love. When he sends Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda out, there's no question of force or, harshness. It's fall at the feet and beg them, please, please become part of our family, become part of our movement, right? And because there's no institutional structure, because they weren't building temples, they weren't incorporating, right? It's house to house, family to family, and heart to heart. And that's the essence of the Krishna consciousness movement. When we share Krishna consciousness with others, they're not generally persuaded because we made a great intellectual argument. They're persuaded because something in us connects with something in them that resonates in regard to there's something here, there's something divine at play, and I can see that there's access to it through this process. When people go out on book distribution, for instance, they're making a connection. Why do we have people go out on the street one-to-one? It's a very, inefficient model of getting your product to the market, right? But it's because that connection, that appreciation for a devotee, that interaction with the devotee, that's what's starting the process, right? There's a Vaishnavi in Denver who has been doing book distribution for longer than many people have been alive. And she said something once that really struck me, that when she distributes a book, she approaches the person with the knowledge that they actually want the book. They may not know it, but deep in their heart, they actually want this book. And that's Lord Chaitanya's mood, that, I'm coming to give you what you really want, even if you don't know it. And I will persuade you, and I will love you, and I will bring you into a relationship.
Yeah, beautifully put. How would you say that this principle, how much of it are we really applying in the movement today? And if we're not applying, which I don't think, because I think we're applying 100%, I'm joking. I wish, right? I wish we were applying 100% of what you just said. But my question is like, why is it much more complicated? Because when you speak it, it's so simple. It made so much sense. And it's what works, and it's what worked, and that's what Mahaprabhu established. But in today's organizational situation, things seems to be like much more difficult. The devotee relationship seems more difficult than how it was back then, even with all the technological advancement. It seems like even within the organization there's politics or bureaucracy, and the Vaishnav relational mood that you just described, the beauty of it. Apparently, unfortunately, we don't see it externally, at least. We don't see that. And why do you think that is?
Yeah. Because we're human beings with false egos. That's the short answer. The longer answer is that we are building an institution, a major institution worldwide that will last for thousands of years. That takes a lot of resources and a lot of energy, and we need that. You know, the work of the strategic planning team and the GBC in professionalizing and upgrading our institutional structure is desperately needed and so welcome. But here's the but. Spiritual life is about balance, right? You know, people would ask Srila Prabhupada, should I do service or should I do sadhana, right? You know, well, both. You know, it's that railroad track, right? We need both to keep the train going forward. And similarly, the relationship, the heart-to-heart exchange has to be part of the institution, right? And it's very difficult to figure out how to institutionalize love, you know. So as we build, as we build our structures, we also have to recognize that we need to leave space for devotees to have these personal interactions. I think one of our fundamental misconceptions is the extent to which we think the temple is the important unit in Krishna consciousness. The temple is important. There's no doubt the temple is important, but the basic unit of exchange, the organizational unit in Chaitanya Lilamrita is not the temple, it is the family, right? And family implies a mother and a father, right? So to the extent that we are not recognizing that family relationship between devotees, we're missing something that's really essential for bhakti, right? If we only relate to each other within the context of our roles in the institution, we are limiting the spread of our movement. We're limiting our own advancement in Krishna consciousness. So we have to bring the heart back in, to the center and remember that ultimately the institution serves the need of devotees to connect, right? If we're not connecting, then the institution kind of loses its meaning.
Yeah, when you say that earlier on, when you were saying that's the basis of Krishna consciousness movement was relationships, and how Mahaprabhu's style was to bring devotees in, to transform them. And I was thinking, sometimes I also wonder, why doesn't Krishna just kill all my anarthas, get rid of it all? Or sometimes I even thought, second initiation will be the beginning, then I start with a clean slate and I have no anarthas or something like that, right? But with what you just said about the institution and the family going together parallelly and as a unit, that shows the point that even like while working with devotees, my anartha nivritti is going on. It's not a separate process. By being in an organization, working under authority, getting my service done, it's also a way for me to clean up my ego. So the relationship itself is the way for me to purify. So it's not like a separate thing. Yeah, that because of that, it's nurturing. The family experience is nurturing, but at the same time, the organization or institution is purifying. So it's like
that's a really important realization too. A lot of times we take negative feedback or interpersonal conflict as a sign a failure, right? It's not. It's a growth opportunity, right? You know, if we are struggling with something, that's Krishna telling us this is an area you need to work on, you know, and Krishna, he will take away our anarthas when we're ready. You know, I may feel like, Lord, I'm so tired of this anartha. Please take my policy. Please, please, please. You know, but there's a part of me that's still holding on. Krishna's trying to take it, and I'm like, yeah, please take it away. Please take it away. You know, pulling back towards myself. You know, so Krishna, he is taking away our anarthas, but you know, we don't always see that process. Yeah.
And speaking of which, even within a family, as much as family brings joy and connectivity, it's after all the sacrifices and struggles. And family means there is the head figures, the mother and the father. So there's a whole role of women in the picture. And within the ISKCON family, how women are treated or how women are seen is also very large part of, you know, how we see that family. You know, I mean, for instance, in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, we have the story of Kala Krishna Das, which kind of reveals like the whole principle of how women can be trouble. And we could kind of take that out of context or exaggerate that. And so what is your realization, being a Vaishnavi minister, working with women, working with children, and seeing the family dynamics within the movement? What do you think is happening in that regard of the women's role?
I have all kinds of thoughts, but I'll share a few. One is that a family where the mother doesn't have a voice is, by definition, a dysfunctional family, right? The loving exchanges become stymied. So similarly, in our institutions, Vaishnavis need to have a voice. And the way that voice is expressed may differ according to time, place, and circumstance. But the fact that the voice needs to be heard, that's universal, you know. And when it comes to loving exchanges and relationships, Vaishnavis are uniquely qualified to take up that service. You know, even neurologically speaking, our brains are better at making connection, and we are more drawn to making interpersonal connections than men are. You know, a lot of times in the secular world, we want to make sure that everything's fair. So men are equal to women, and that's fine. But it doesn't mean we're the same. We're not the same. There are differences. And we need to use those differences in a really positive way. So when I look at my relationships, oftentimes I'm interacting with another person on the basis of, what do they think about me? What am I getting out of this relationship? Me, right? And what if we all, and especially as Vaishnavis, as mothers, what if we switch that and look at each person as a child, our child who needs our help to advance in Krishna consciousness? What if I asked in each interaction, how can I facilitate this devotee's spiritual growth? You would not get such a powerful effect from any institutional rule that you implement as you would from just us shifting our consciousness from what about me to how can I serve you?
Okay, that's something to digest, because that's a common reaction, right? What's in it for me? What am I going to get in this relationship? And sometimes it's also the fear of the past experiences, maybe giving into the family, into the ISKCON family a lot. Some people may say, I gave 20 years of my life to ISKCON. I gave my youth, I gave my energy, I gave my dedication, everything to it. And when I was in need, in times of need, nobody came to help me. Nobody was there to support me. I saw them as my family and I gave my everything. But I wasn't seen as a family member who was human, and I had my, needs. So sometimes devotees have that experience that makes us shy away from seeing everybody as family,
Yeah. It's true that many times we're going to be disappointed and let down by ISKCON, the institution, or by the particular devotees we're serving with. It's always a tragedy when it happens. It's not something that we should just say, oh yeah, that happens, deal with it. It's something we should seek to change. We don't, at least I don't, really deeply understand the value of each individual devotee, right? We take each other for granted, right? And also, I think there's a sense in which we feel like it's someone else's responsibility. You're sick, you're struggling. Why don't they do something for this devotee? We are the they, right? And especially for Vaishnavis, again, we are the ones who may see the need, because we're more focused on how other people are doing. We're the ones who can then take some action. And it doesn't mean that I personally have to solve the problem of every devotee I come in contact with. That's not the mood, right? But I can take whatever action is within my sphere of influence.
Wow. Yeah. That takes a lot of courage to take that personal responsibility. And also the philosophy is about detachment, right? So to have that sense of detachment is also
what but it's detachment with love. It's that I'm not attached to you because what I think I can get out of you. I'm attached to you because I want to help you serve Krishna, right?
That's harder, honestly, but that's what works. Yeah. And now we're kind of entering our main topic of today about the life of Vaishnavis in Śrī Caitanya-caritāmṛta. And we have a question by Shyamasaki, who is also our technical assistant today. She is asking us this very relevant question. How do we understand by seeing Lord Chaitanya's relationship with women? ? Only women who played important role in his life are his mother and wife. Both of them he left for the higher purpose. Of course, he made a compromise going to Puri instead of Vrindavan to appease his mom, but it might be seen as harsh or insensitive. Please give insight into these pastimes.
Okay, so first of all, it's really important to look at the role of Vaishnavis in Caitanya-caritāmṛta as a whole, okay? Because like Sachi's relationship with Nimai is only one of many relationships that she has, and they all kind of work together. So sometimes there's an apparent inconsistency in the way that women are dealt with in Caitanya-caritāmṛta. Śrī Radha Govinda, you mentioned Kala Krishna Das, right? And we know that he became entangled with the gypsy women, right? And then was rejected by Mahaprabhu. So, there are these rules and Vaishnava etiquette for a reason. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is making a very important point about the danger of associating with women if you're a renunciant. And we don't want to minimize that lesson. But that's not the only interaction between men and women in the Caitanya-caritāmṛta. First of all, the lesson of inclusion is that even though Mahaprabhu rejected Kala Krishna, Nityananda engaged him in service. And what was that service? It was to go to Mother Sachi and tell her that Mahaprabhu had arrived safely at his destination. So not only is Nityananda giving shelter to this Prabhu, this devotee, Vaishnava, but he's also making sure that Sachi is included and taken care of, that her mind is put at rest. And we see a lot of that kind of interaction in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, that devotees are taking care of Sachi, right? Devotees are taking care of Vaishnavis. And at the same time, these Vaishnavis are reciprocating with the devotees. It's just within a context that protects them, right? One of the things that we see is that when Mahaprabhu interacts with, he doesn't interact with women as women. Let me put it that way, right? He's when he's married, he has this nice relationship with his wives, but when he becomes a renunciate, he's not interacting personally with women. But a woman climbs on him in the temple in order to see Lord Jagannath, and that's okay, right? How is that? Kala Krishna, was banned for associating with women, but, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is having this physical exchange with this woman, and that's okay. Well, it's because Mahaprabhu is relating to her in that moment as a devotee, right? Not as a woman. She's in a state of bhav, like beyond man, woman, and so is he, so. The other way that we see Vaishnavis relating to Vaishnavas in Caitanya-caritāmṛta is as mother. This theme of motherhood is so important in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, right? Because it's the mother energy that brings that compassion. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is bringing that feminine energy because he's Krishna in Radha's mood, right? So this, Radha is the all mother, Jagamata. So that mother energy is really important. And we see that in relationships between Nityananda and Chaitanya and Sachi and other Vaishnavis. I find it fascinating that Nityananda is personally fed by Malini, Srivasa's wife. She has to personally feed him or he won't eat, right? So that mother energy is there in that relationship. And Sachimata, of course, Nimai is her son, so there's definitely that aspect. But she also takes Nityananda as her son. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu leaves the home, other devotees, including Nityananda, are going to Sachi and helping her and taking care of her and interacting with her and accepting that exchange of love on that motherhood basis. In fact, when I think about how strong the mother theme is in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, it almost feels inevitable that Janavamata would become the institutional, the Gaudiya Vaishnava head, the head of that movement, because she's like the mother energy personified. Yeah. So, and maybe just to expound on that a little bit, when we look at the pastime where Lord Chaitanya is going, he's taken sannyas and he's planning to go to Vrindavan, and he's, tricked into going to Advaita's house. Right. And he sees his mother. His first reaction is not, oh, I'm a sannyas, I'm dead to the world. My family relationships are finished. She's still his mother. He falls at her feet. She takes him in her lap. Right. What kind of scandal would it be, if one of our sannyasis in ISKCON, was photographed sitting in his mother's lap, right? It's not done. That's not the etiquette. So why is Mahaprabhu doing this? He is emphasizing the importance of the mother, right? He takes her instructions to heart and adjusts his mission to accommodate her. She's that important. So a lot of times when we talk about Vaishnavis, we minimize what it really means to be a mother, right? A mother is a leader. A mother gives inspiration. A mother gives encouragement. A mother is essential to the family. Mahaprabhu, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead unfolds his pastimes, each part has meaning, right? It's not random. Right. So we see here that, his father left, right, while the mission was still unfulfilled. His mother is the one who remained. Right. Mm-hmm. So that mother energy was a big part of what Mahaprabhu came to show us.
So in the light of this principle that you clarified, the apparently contradictory thing about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu having a particular instruction with Kala Krishna Das and he himself being beyond it in terms of the rules. Could we say that the role of women, even just in the world back then, 500 years ago, the position that the women were in, the things that they were allowed to do, not allowed to do, is very different from today. And motherhood 500 years ago and today is also has a completely different, we can say, if somebody is in the organization ISKCON, as a Vaishnavi who's sharing Krishna consciousness, she can be a mother to so many people. So like a broader understanding of motherhood. It's an emotion, it's a feeling. And it's not necessarily a role for the woman is not only to be a mother to your own biological children, but the role of the connecting with the feminine energy, the mother energy, and giving, nurturing that family of ISKCON, family of Krishna consciousness. Could we say that it's not really understood well within our movement, and therefore we have certain inconsistencies and bad results? It's a bold question, but there it goes. It's on my mind.
Yeah. We definitely, as Vaishnavis, we need to look beyond our own immediate family when we think about being a mother. Whether you're married or you're not married, you have your own children, you don't. We bring that mother energy. At the same time, we have to be realistic about the dangers of male-female interactions. One of the things that I don't think we talk about enough is the difference between a Vaishnavi who's 25 and a Vaishnavi who's 65, right? There's a huge difference in what's appropriate for one and what's appropriate for the other. If I ask a brahmachari at my temple, is there anything you need? That is very motherly. If I was 25 and I was doing that, that would be problematic. So we have to think about, time, place, and circumstance in our interactions. And I think this is one thing that challenges us in spiritual life, right? We look for rules that we can enforce, that we can follow, where we will always be sure that we are doing the right thing. When I was a young devotee, I never looked at a brahmachari in the face, ever, right? Years later, my husband was referring to having run into some brahmachari, former brahmachari from our temple, and he was describing how the person looked, and I said to him, I don't know what any of them looked like. I only looked at their feet, right? So it was this idea of having an appropriate relationship at the appropriate time.
That's clear.
Yeah.
That's very clear. Thank you. The other part of the equation is Mahaprabhu is known as Sachi Suta Gaurahari. So he is Jaya Sachinandana. And that's like taking Sachimata's name to identify him. So the value of a Vaishnavi was so much emphasized. Yet, sometimes in today's world, there is so much, let's say, black and white understanding of women's position. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So how do we integrate that and bring that understanding that you have been mentioning all through the interview about bringing that family mood, seeing how Mahaprabhu saw as Vaishnavis? Because one thing is Mahaprabhu establishing what a sannyasi should or shouldn't do, but another whole aspect is women's role in the whole organization or an institution. So what would be your vision for this?
Well, one thought is that the role of women in Caitanya-caritāmṛta is really defined by marriage as well. All of these are married, and that's intentional, right? The emphasis on getting married is presented to us as both a yajna, it's an offering to the Lord, and it's an essential part of life. We in ISKCON, we have tended to emphasize renunciation for men over marriage, at least in the past. And that does a disservice, I think, because it's the Grihastha ashram, that is the foundation of the Hare Krishna movement, of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. It's the Grihastha ashram. It's the Grihasthas that are being converted, are taking to Krishna consciousness, are spreading Krishna consciousness. When we look at renunciation in terms of Caitanya-caritāmṛta, it's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everybody else is operating within this context of being married. So this idea of women is really important. Now, when we translate that to the modern age, right, we have to be thoughtful and intentional, because there are a lot of unmarried women in our movement. There are sometimes a lack of suitable partners. Sometimes, a partner has, disappeared or left his body or whatever, right? And we may tend to say, okay, it's the family's responsibility to take care of these women, her brother, her husband, her father, right? And okay, if your family's Vaishnavas, that's great, right? What if your family's not? And that happens to plenty of Vaishnavis. So this idea that, again, that we're not just an institution, we are also a family, means, taking responsibility for how do we shelter these young women. There's a sense sometimes in which it almost feels like we want them to go away, right? And instead we need to lean into taking care of them. The first time I ever went to a temple, I was a young mother. I had, this baby, right? And I came to hear a certain sannyasi speak. And I was told I couldn't sit in the class with my baby, but that there was a room for the mothers with babies, and I would be able to hear the class from in there, right? And that was wonderful. I thought, oh my gosh, these are, such progressive people. They really care about women, right? And the only thing about that room with the lovely expensive speakers was that the speakers were not actually hooked up to anything. So you could hear nothing, it was just an empty room with nice speakers, no meaning. So I kept opening the door so that I could hear, right? And at some point, the temple president said somebody to tell me to leave because my baby was making noise and disturbing the class, right? So my perception of ISKCON did a 180, like they don't like women. They don't want women there, which isn't true. It's not true. But when we think about Vaishnavis in our movement, as Vaishnavis, we can think, how can I serve everyone? For Vaishnavis, we can also think, what do they need? How can we facilitate the service of Vaishnavis? As the Vaishnavi minister, that is my role, is to facilitate the service of Vaishnavis in ISKCON. And we see that modeled so well in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, where devotees are coming to Sachi and saying, what do you need? Bringing messages of love and exchanges of love from Mahaprabhu. And there's even a young man who cleans Sachi's rooms, right? So taking care of the Vaishnavis in an appropriate way.
Yes. I remember here in Mayapur, we have Chaitanya, it's actually Yogapeeth. And in Yogapeeth, we have this Gaura and Gadadhar, Gaur Gadadhar deities. And underneath Gaur Gadadhar deities is the Samadhi of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mother.
Yeah.
So the pastime is such that she wanted Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur to establish Lakshmi Nrsimhadev and Gaur Gadadhar. And so in honor of her, he actually put the Samadhi underneath these deities.
Wow.
And that's Bhakti Siddhanta. So that shows again the value. So from what I understood with your sharing about Caitanya-caritāmṛta, the way women were taken care, the way the women were served, the Vaishnavis were encouraged to be their best, according to that time, place, and circumstance, encouraging them, protecting them, and to being their best as devotees, as Vaishnavis. And it's not like the half chicken logic that we want the service that Vaishnavis can offer. We want the eggs, so to speak. We want them to serve in the kitchen or the temple, and we want them to assist us. We want them to produce Krishna conscious children, but we don't want to actually help them be their best or use their nature according to their destiny or karma, what Krishna wants, but to be able to adapt according to time, place, and circumstance and see what the women need. And as you were saying with your example also of the experience of going into the temple where the mothers had the room, to to make sure that the woman is given the philosophical nourishment as well, along with trying to follow the rules. So that's what you're saying, is to give women the place to grow. And then they'll be able to provide or help the movement in a much more powerful manner.
Yeah, Vaishnavis are definitely an underutilized resource in our movement. And I also just want to mention Janava Mata as well, because she emerges as the leader of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement after Nityananda Prabhu's departure. Right. And again, Krishna is not arranging things whimsically or by accident. It's not an accident that Janava Mata became the leader. This is, again, highlighting, something about Vaishnavis. And people will say, right, that, and it's true that, she's not Jivataka, she's not an individual spark, she's divine energy, the mother energy, the divine energy, right? And that's true, right? But God does not set us a bad example. God does not do things that we are not supposed to do, just to say, I can do it and you can't, right? There's a message there by how Sachi is treated, by how Janava Mata is respected. There's a message there about how valuable Vaishnavis are, right? And leadership is not something that can only be done by, males or only done by. Sometimes management may require a particular type of person, but leadership, which is what Janava Mata is manifesting, that's done by anybody and everybody, right? If you have, the good qualities, the realization, the desire to be a leader, then, Krishna will use you in that way. And again, it goes back to thinking, how can I help these devotees? How can I inspire? How can I, facilitate? How can I enhance their service? So Janava Mata, it's not because somebody said, all right, you're in charge, you're the temple president, you're the, the GBC, go be a leader. She was a leader. All the devotees did was recognize that.
Yeah. Along the lines of the gender roles, we have a question by Shamasaki. Did Vaishnavis and Caitanya-caritāmṛta reflect gender roles in any pastime? Because Srila Prabhupada never categorized on who should take what responsibilities. You touched upon it, but perhaps you can elaborate about this.
One of the things that we don't often think about is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was a social revolutionary, right? He intentionally changed certain social norms, right? Who can have access to the divine, right? People who did not qualify under the old rules, Muslims, women, right? He's intentionally saying, okay, those rules don't apply because the rules of society have to serve bhakti. Bhakti doesn't serve the social order. The social order is to facilitate bhakti. So the extent we're in an organization that allows social change. Social change is part of what we do, not just for the sake of social change, not because materialists are endorsing it, but when it will enhance bhakti. And when Srila Prabhupada was present, he engaged Vaishnavis in roles that were not traditional, right? And that, starting with Janava Mata, that she was the head, right? She was the leader, the highest authority. And her manifestation of that authority was to continually serve the devotees and make it possible for them to practice Krishna consciousness, which is, the sign of a real leader. But Srila Prabhupada also said, let us engage these Vaishnavis in ways that will enhance their Krishna consciousness and will help us to spread Krishna consciousness. So Vaishnavi pujaris, speakers, kirtan leaders, department heads, he engaged them in all of these ways. Sometimes it caused some pushback, on a social level, and he would adjust, right? But there's no philosophical or theological rule that says, at least in Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, that says only men can speak in public, only men can lead kirtan. You have to go outside the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition to find those rules.
And sometimes we do see that women are better managers than men, not just leaders. We have seen that as well.
We bring different strengths to the table. I mean, there's a whole lot of research in, neurology and brain science that shows that women process information differently than men, that women are much better at multitasking. Men are much better at focusing, right? And ideally, your leadership team has people who can, you want all of those. You want all of those on your leadership team. Whenever we have a society that is only including the males, we're missing some things. And if we had a society that only included the females, we would be missing some things. But it's this union of male and female. We talk about division between male and female a lot, but this union of male and female is so important. It's Radha and Krishna, right? Lakshmi Nrsimha, even God brings his feminine side, into the arena.
Yes. Wonderful. Oh, I love that part. I especially appreciated that point that you keep bringing up, about social order is meant for facilitating bhakti. That is a very deep statement. It's not understood that way. A lot of times we're so stuck up about the social order that we really lose our mind in it, and we become so focused on trying to establish that we tend to forget compassion. Or like in the beginning of the interview, you were saying how Mahaprabhu's mood was to be compassionate and get everybody involved, but sometimes we forget that part and we focus more on how Mahaprabhu was very strong with Kala Krishna. So it's like, we may sometimes focus on what is it called, we pick and choose things that cater our belief system, and we don't take the whole thing into consideration. And you mentioned that in the beginning, to see Mahaprabhu's mission, or to see how Vaishnavis were at that time, you have to see the whole picture and not just pick and choose instructions or pastimes. I appreciated that point.
And also, it means that lots of us have to be involved. You can't tell a temple manager, you've got to make sure that, everything runs on time, the kitchen is, up to the health codes, and the deity offerings are happening on time. And we want you to be super personal and facilitate the devotional life of every person who walks in the temple, right? It's not realistic. And managers often need to focus on, okay, look, this is the rules. I can't deal with this. Just, follow the rules. But those of us who aren't in management can bring that other piece into the community, to nurture devotees, to show devotees that they're valued, to ask them what they need and reciprocate with them. Nobody has to appoint you to do that, right? You have the power to do that right now.
It's true. I have a question, which is like a autumn bomb question. Do you think, as a ISKCON organization, as a Vaishnavi minister, as somebody working for the protection of women and hearing abuse stories around ISKCON, etc., Do you think that there's a fear of women leadership within the movement?
I definitely think that there is a human tendency to fear what we don't know, right? And sometimes it manifests as being afraid of working with women or being afraid of women as leaders. Sometimes it manifests as being afraid of people who externally don't look like devotees, or whatever that's supposed to mean, or just are not like me. I live in Southern California, and people dress in all kinds of strange ways, and being extreme, being outside of the norms of society is kind of a norm of society in Southern California. And sometimes people will come to the temple and they have big holes in their ears and, all kinds of tattoos and metal pieces sticking out of their faces, right? And you can see, it's a little intimidating to preach to such people because they do look so different, right? Especially as an older person who didn't grow up around people who look like that. But then when you talk to them, you realize, oh, this is just another spirit soul looking for shelter. Right. So it's that same thing. When we're used to seeing Vaishnavis in a certain role, it's a little scary, to see somebody in a new role. Right.
I like your diplomatic answer.
But, when I was younger, I really did think that people who didn't agree with my interpretation of Krishna consciousness were wrong and probably hated women, right? And as I've grown older and interacted with these people more, I know that I was completely wrong about that. That there's a lot of nuance in how men and women interact, in what a woman leader looks like, and what's appropriate for a particular community at a particular time. There's a whole lot of nuance in there. And the people who see things differently from me are 100% devoted to serving Srila Prabhupada to the best of their ability, right? So when I understand that, then I see, okay, look, we're part of the same family. We can work this out. We can find a way that everybody can be engaged according to their propensities in a way that the social order around them can be stable. We can do this.
Okay, there's another question. Lord Chaitanya and our other acharyas, Vaishnava acharyas, right? Until, of course, anyway, it's a question somebody else is asking. I shouldn't answer it. Lord Chaitanya and acharyas, did they take instructions from women?
Yes. We forget that the mother is the first teacher. Of course, every man takes instruction from women. Society doesn't work unless you do, right? The question becomes, as we get older, which women we take instruction from and in which circumstances we do that. But we see this point with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sachimata where, she says, please stay, close, don't go so far away. And he accepts. That's this idea that only men or only women must always be like this. That's where we run into trouble, because bhakti is about relationships. Relationships are about nuance, not about rules.
Wow, that was a powerful answer, and that's true. And in fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also comes in the line of having, we had dozens of women Diksha Gurus, which means there was even a instruction from Diksha level as well. So that was a very good answer about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or our acharyas taking instruction from the mothers. That's the beginning of every education. Radha Prabhu, is there something you would like to share with our audience today before we wind up the interview today?
One of the lessons that I saw in the Caitanya-caritāmṛta while preparing for this session that I didn't talk about is the extent to which Vaishnavis need to relate to Vaishnavis, right? Because our society is built on, strong leaders who happen to be male and happen to be renunciants, we tend to think that that's where wisdom comes from, right? And women who feel unsheltered are very frequently trying to take shelter of a man, whether it's guru, whatever. We forget that Vaishnavis can offer shelter to Vaishnavis. And in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, Sachimata's loving exchanges with not only Mahaprabhu's wives, but with Nityananda's wives as well. There are these deep relationships. And so as older women, we need to offer shelter to younger women and to each other, right? And we need to remember that we have things to learn. As women, we have things to learn from women. Yeah.
We've had a few quotes from you from today's interview. We pulled out certain principles that you said, and one of them is that Vaishnavis should relate more with Vaishnavis and associate so that they can feel shelter. I totally agree, and I have that personal experience as well. So thank you so much for giving us your shelter and for being such a good example of a woman, of a mother, of a Vaishnavi, of a leader. And you make us all feel proud and sheltered. Thank you very much for your association. And thank you very much to Shyamasaki Mataji, who is behind the technical assistance here, and also Ananta Shesh Prabhu. And thank you to the whole GBC SPT team for organizing this interview and making us feel sheltered and have better Vaishnava relationships. Thank you very much, Radha Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Bol.